Ladies and gents, welcome back. We have an Alberta provincial election coming up at the end of this month. If you're not registered and you live in Alberta, you better go out and get registered to vote. It's coming up very soon. And well, to bring us up to speed on what's happening in Alberta, I figured who else to ask but Marty Up North. Marty Up North, thank you so much for joining today.
Clyde, happy to be here as always, man.
So can you give me a rundown, like where are we now? Like what I know a lot's happened in the past decade or so. Where are we now and leading up to this election?
Yeah, so the writ was dropped a couple of days ago, so we're going to the polls on the 29th, but we all knew that. I mean, the parties here in Alberta have been sort of in election mode for a while. But, for some of you viewers who aren't totally familiar with Alberta, let me give you a quick history. Alberta was conservative 40 years straight. Like for the majority of my adult life, it was always you barely even noticed anything. You voted and it was conservative. And then conservatives got a little bit cocky, in 2013-14 and started doing things that real conservatives don't like. And the government started spending a lot, spending. And so some conservatives voters were like, whoa, this is Alberta. We like small governments and so forth. And so there was a break in the ranks in 2014, and we had sort of similar to what's going on with the conservatives at the federal level and the PPC, and so there was some division, and then we created the Wild Rose Party and the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party won. The Wild Rose ended up being a minority, the opposition, which is weird. And then things got really ugly. There was some fighting. Danielle Smith at the time was part of the Wild Rose. She crossed floors. Her excuse at the time for crossing floors was that she couldn't in all consciousness be the opposition because she agreed with the main governing party of Jim Prentice. So anyways, it created a weird dynamic. She crossed the floor, pissed off people. And then Prentice tried to resecure a quick term, and he called a snap election, and the electorate in Alberta said nope. And everybody went to the polls, and we all voted for the NDP. And we wake up on, Wednesday morning in 2015, and Rachel Notley is elected. And she was even unprepared. I mean, she barely had a suite of MLAs, and then she had these MLAs that just didn't know what to do anyways. And she ruled from 2015 to 19, and not a very popular era. I mean, a lot of Albertans in hindsight realized, oh shit, it was a reactionary vote. We got her elected. Now we had to deal with it. And but the Conservatives were still divided, and out comes Jason Kenney. So Jason Kenney at the time was in Ottawa as a federal politician, and he saw an opportunity to come back to Alberta to regain, to bring the Conservatives back to power. So Kenney showed up in Alberta in, let's say, 2017-18 with the idea of uniting those two conservative groups that had previously fought. So the Conservatives and the Wild Rose, and he did succeed in uniting them. And then there was a leadership battle, and Kenney came out on top. So Kenney got elected. So we had this horrible 4-year period with the NDP, and then Kenney reunited all the Conservatives, got elected. Poor Kenney, starts working on rebuilding after some of the damage done by the NDP, and he gets hit by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kenney did a couple of mistakes. He, in my opinion, anyways, that he was so familiar. He had been in Ottawa for so long that he brings his Ottawa apparatus to help him in Alberta. So he brings all these political advisors that are misadvising him. They weren't reading the room very well in terms of what Albertans wanted. And then he also did the double whammy of not really listening to his entire caucus, and he was listening mostly to his cabinet and to a small group of people. And so, and in hindsight, he had this beautiful cabinet, this beautiful caucus of 60 Albertan MLAs, some of them quite talented, but he kind of ignored them. And then COVID, his COVID policies were unpopular because of that. His policies were mostly populist. He had no choice. Well, I think he did have a choice. I mean, I think he could have pulled a Ron DeSantis type of leadership, but he really went with popularity. But weirdly, his policies didn't appeal to his base and didn't appeal to the NDP. I mean, he seemed to be picking these lose-lose policies. Mm-hmm. So anyways, he got forced into a leadership review, and he technically won the leadership review, not by much, 51.7%. But even as soon as he won and they announced that he won, he stepped up to the mic and he says, I obviously don't have a majority, a really good majority, and he stepped down. So then we had a leadership review, and lo and behold, Danielle Smith, whom we all thought was done with politics, reappears. So that's where we are now. So we have Danielle Smith, who's been elected, who was chosen leader and won her seat only for a mere 4 months now, and we have Rachel Notley, who ran the province for 4 months, 4 years, ran as opposition for 4 years, and is still running. So it's a dead heat right now between Rachel Notley and Danielle Smith. The other parties are non-existent. The Greens, the Liberals, the Alberta Party,
Right.
they're not even polling. They're non-existent. And when I say it's a dead heat right now, it's believing the polls, but it's also, I talked to a lot of people. So I would say Danielle truly has the rural vote. So of the 86 ridings in Alberta, 40 of them are rural, or maybe less, 30 of them are rural. She has those. The rural Albertans in small town Alberta, they're conservative. And Rachel Notley has Edmonton. Edmonton is our provincial capital. It's all our bureaucracies there. It's all there. So she has all those ridings. And so the battleground right now is Calgary, and Calgary appears to be 50-50.
Oh, okay. So everyone's decided. We're the votes. The fence sitters are all in Calgary. So what are the issues?
And the fence sitters aren't that numerous. I mean, the pundits are saying that like maybe 15% of people are undecided in any election. So there's not a lot of fence sitters. So the next 3 weeks are critical. They're crucial for both parties.
So it's coming down to those individual things. Now, a lot of people from my audience are praising Danielle Smith for the things that she's been bringing through, the Sovereignty Act and a number of other things, promises with the healthcare system, which I think is being misrepresented from the other side. I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
Well, yeah. So what are the electoral sort of platforms? It really appears as if Rachel is going to campaign on healthcare. Post-COVID, during COVID, healthcare, became front and center, and it really exposed the cracks in the healthcare. But those are cracks that have been there for 40 years. They're cracks that are in every other jurisdiction in Canada. So, and they're cracks where people are saying, well, you had 4 years to repair some of those cracks and you did nothing.
Just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rachel is campaigning on that. And Danielle is campaigning, she is a Ron DeSantis. She is she's a true libertarian, small government, pro-capital, independent minded, and so an independent Alberta is not part of her platform. But an Alberta that gets a fair shake out of Confederation is part of her platform. But Danielle is basically a fiscal conservative, voting on, or campaigning on long-term prosperity, lower taxes, fixing the healthcare. But she does have one nice point that she's trying to capitalize on right now, which is public safety. I think British Columbia has the same issue in, say, large cities like Vancouver and whatnot. So Calgary right now is a mess. We had that shooting in Edmonton 2 months ago, the two police officers that were killed, and there seems to be some real violence constantly. So she's campaigning on that and blaming the NDP and the woke crowd for that. So the battle lines are starting to get drawn, but we're 3 days into the official campaign. So it's hard to see where it's going to land, but it's going to be interesting, because Rachel really can't campaign on her past. There's just not much there to brag about. She doesn't seem to offer a lot of new stuff. But then Danielle also has a past, which is she crossed the floor once. And some people aren't forgiving that quickly. But the other thing is she is very, very far to the right. And in fact, I saw something that explained it well the other day. She's farther to the right than Rachel is to the left. So Rachel's a little bit closer to the center. And they're saying that that's why here in Calgary, Danielle might have to try and bring herself a little more to the center because that's the battleground, and she is as conservative and as fiscally minded as she is scaring some people in Calgary.
Well, I know the public safety thing is a big issue. Yeah, I'm in British Columbia. We're hearing about this. NDP, I believe Rachel Notley ran on the defund the police platform years ago, and that is turning out not to be very good for anyone who had that
They're
sort of.
bringing that up a lot. I mean, her in particular, not, but about 6 or 7 of her MLAs were very vocal against the police in the last 4 years.
Right. So
Yeah.
a lot of Canadians from all sorts of other provinces are paying close attention to this election because how closely aligned Rachel Notley is to Justin Trudeau, especially when it comes to energy policy. Where does this sit with people in Alberta? A lot of Canadians are like, well, we can't have a vote in this, and this is pretty crucial to us.
It is. It's interesting. It's I got a little bit of goosebumps thinking about it. You know, I don't want to get completely hyperbolic, but it could be a significant election, a significant Canadian election for a lot of reasons. If for instance Rachel managed to get back in, then that just gives Trudeau that faint hope for the next one. I mean, he has a strong ally in Alberta. Not that he really needs Alberta for anything, but you know, he might need a few seats from Alberta in the next election. So an ally in Rachel helped him in the past and could help him now. But if Rachel wins, I think it could. There's an element of Alberta. There's a separatist element in Alberta that is so powerful that I think that you'll see it will flame that. And I think the separatist movement in Alberta will be powerful for the next 4 years and could become a real growing concern for the country as a whole. You know, I've often thought that Quebec would be the first one to separate, but now I'm kind of having this idea that Alberta might be one of the first ones to separate. And behind the scenes, I've talked to a few MLAs, and there is an interesting cooperation going on with Quebec and Alberta at the provincial level that we don't hear about often. So they do have mutual interest when it comes to dealing with Ottawa, and they can be, it makes an interesting marriage, Alberta and Quebec. So I think, I mean, for the country, then for some people are going to be scared that if on the flip side, if Danielle comes in, then I'm sure Trudeau is also going to play that in the rest of Canada, because they're going to keep portraying her as that radical Trump-like person. I mean, you know, luckily she's a female, because if she was a male version of Danielle Smith would be a Trump-like person, minus the politically wise, but not commentary wise. I mean, Trump, you know, love Trump, but you know, all we need, like, take his Twitter account, which right. And I'm a pro Danielle person, but I can tell right now that behind the scenes, her team is actually toning her down a little bit and keeping her off the airwaves, because she doesn't have a filter, and when she's talking, you can hear her thought patterns, and when you hear the way she's reasoning something, you hear all the steps, and then the steps become sound bites. So right. You know, so they're but then both parties, I mean that's one of the things I asked on Twitter today, and I didn't get a really good answer. You know, Alberta's famous for its bozo eruptions, we call them, and usually they come from the radical right, they come from the Christian side. You know, it's some pastor at some point is going to come out with a brimstone and fire speech or something. So where's the bozo eruption coming from? And so far it's actually been quite boring. The campaign's been quite boring.
Fair enough. Well, I next time I have you on, I want to talk more about the connection with Quebec and Alberta, but for the sake of time, we're going to have to end it here. Marty, where can people find you online?
Marty Up North on 2 platforms. So Marty Up North on Twitter or Marty Up North on YouTube. But I haven't been very active on YouTube, although I'll start again, because YouTube is where I do my hiking and the weather's starting to get gorgeous. So
nice.
But if you want the unfiltered political Marty, go to Marty Up North on Twitter.
Links are always in the description down below. Thanks again for joining.
Clyde, have a good one. Hey, go Oilers.